So when you look at the recent history of China and the intolerance of dissent, how significant have these protests been over the past month or so?
We really haven't seen protests like this, where you have citizens around the country in various cities protesting about exactly the same thing. And this thing is these COVID restrictions on movement of people and business. And, it's just an all encompassing lockdown that people are indicating they've had enough of.
Yeah, you talk about this all-encompassing lockdown. Just take us into some of the detail of this to give people here an idea of just how severe it's been.
Right. I mean, lockdowns mean different things in different places. And in China, it is a physical lockdown in many cases where an apartment door will be sometimes bolted shut or welded shut, even in some cases. And these protests that we have seen on the streets of Shanghai, Beijing, and a number of other cities seem to have been sparked by a fire that killed some people who were under a lockdown like that, where they were unable to get out of the building. And that resonated, it appears, with many people around China who have faced similar kinds of physical lockdowns, being unable to leave their apartment building for, sometimes weeks at a time. And so even when there is not a lockdown, there is an electronic monitoring of people by their mobile phone, that you need to show a particular code, a green code, to get into a shopping center, to go to a restaurant, to get on a bus. And it is really something that is affecting every single person in that country. And the question is, how long can these go on, these controls?
Yeah, so over the past 24 hours or so, it seems to be there's been a bit of a shift in the tone, with a key official saying there's a new situation and some easing of restrictions. What's the substance of what's happened over the past 24 hours?
Right. These words that there's a new situation and new tasks ahead by a vice premier in China have indicated that there is some movement, that there is some wiggle room here. And we've also seen some cities say that they're going to do things a little bit differently. And, the proof is going to be in the pudding here, whether they follow through and they really do start to relax some of these restrictions. There have been orders from on high to do that. We'll see whether on the ground, A, whether there is a significant rollback of the restrictions, and B, whether it satisfies people, going forward.
So does it appear these protests have had an impact?
It's probably fair to say that the protests have been widely noticed by the leadership of China, and that the words, the easing of the words in words rather than necessarily deeds so far, do suggest that they are responding, that they are suggesting that they're listening to the people. But again, China has a problem when winter is setting in, and there could and at a time when COVID is spreading in a way that it really hasn't for quite a long time, and the vaccination rate is relatively low, and it's especially low with elderly people. So it's unclear whether the words are going to translate into real action that put China on a course toward living with COVID as those of us in many other countries are experiencing.
Considering the dominant power of Xi Jinping, have you been surprised at these protests, and what have these protests told us about the authority of Xi Jinping?
The question is whether people are thinking that Xi Jinping is in some way vulnerable. He has made it clear that the zero COVID policy, these lockdowns, are his idea. That's his policy. And it makes it difficult to go from zero to, a little more than zero. He is in a box because he has so promoted this idea that this is the way to deal with COVID in China, that getting out of it and easing the restrictions is difficult. Now, virtually nobody we are speaking with seems to think that Xi Jinping is politically weakened or threatened, at least. I mean, there is a vulnerability here. They certainly don't look good. He is not. He's described as the chairman of everything in China. So there are some kinks in the armor here, and we don't know how far this will go. But it doesn't seem, from the experts who look at China, that his position is somehow gravely threatened by some of the students we've seen on the street.
Would the recent death of former leader Jiang Zemin be weighing on officials' minds as well in terms of the mood of the people?
Yes. There are a lot of things coming together in the political calendar, including Xi Jinping going for his third consecutive term. And while Jiang Zemin was an elderly man and he's really been gone from the scene for a while, his death isn't a major surprise. But a funeral, a memorial period in China is traditionally one where people come out and mourn. And one of the ways that you mourn somebody like that is you're suggesting that the person in power now is less great. And Jiang Zemin certainly was, the kind of guy who was known for singing with leaders of other countries, and he took interviews. He was a little more approachable than somebody like Xi Jinping, who is stiffer and much more distant from from the people. And in that case, people coming out and mourning Jiang Zemin does suggest a little bit of a protest against the current leader, Xi Jinping.
Okay, James Aretti in New York City. Really good to get your perspective there from the Wall Street Journal.
Thank you.